Sienna, God, hello, all. Oshta, afternoon, good afternoon, Wado, thank you for watching. So this is day 19 of reading Black Rednecks and White Liberals by Thomas Sowell. Happy Independence Day, happy 250th. This is part A. While the New England culture that was transplanted into various southern enclaves after the Civil War had remarkable successes, later successful black schools a century later usually had no New England origins, but like New England, they represented a culture very unlike the black redneck culture. Ralph Ellison has pointed out that such stellar black singers as Paul Robeson, Robeson, and Marian, Marian Anderson, end quotes, received their development from an extensive personal contact with European culture, free from the influences which shape Southern Negro personality in the United States, end quote. For those who are interested in schools that produce academic success for minority students, there is no lack of examples, past and present. Tragically, there has been an utter lack of interest in academically successful black schools by most educators. Among the few who have even bothered to take notice, too many have been as dogmatic as Kenneth B. Clark, who said that, in quotes, excellence at Dunbar represented the few, end quote. That Dunbar, in quotes, is the only example in our history of a separate black school that was able somehow to be equal, end quote. A result of unique circumstances, end quote, that could scarcely have existed in any other part of the country, end quote. Every one of these unsubstantiated claims was demonstrably, demonstrably untrue. 1/3 of all black high school students in Washington were not, quote unquote, the few. There were and are other black schools that met or exceeded national norms, as examples discussed here have shown, and far from being confined to Washington, they have been found from New England to California. Why this ignoring or dismissal of equals of black educational success? Sometimes the reason is ideological. Some, like Professor Clark, have a vested interest in the doctrine that separate is inferior, which underpinned the historic Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision in which his research was cited. To say that mixing and matching racial groups is not a prerequisite for quality education would call into question the decades-long school bus and struggle, which might then be seen in retrospect as a costly and divisive wild goose chase, and questions might be raised about the current mantra of quote-unquote diversity. Other reasons for ignoring or downplaying successful black schools include the fact that there is no political mileage or financial benefits to be gotten from focusing on such schools, despite how much of an educational goldmine their experience might be for black children. Put bluntly, failure attracts more money than success. Ooh, oh my God. Totally. It sure does, doesn't it? Financial incentive to fail doesn't really give them financial incentive to succeed, does it? Wow. Okay. Politically, failure becomes a reason to demand more money, smaller classes, and more trendy courses and programs, ranging from quote-unquote black English to bilingualism and quote-unquote self-esteem. Politicians who want to look compassionate and concerned know that voting money for such projects accomplishes that purpose for them, and voting against such programs, there we go, programs risk charges of mean-spiritedness, if not implications of racism, right? Ironically, many of the bitter end defenders of the current public school system and its educational dogmas are also in favor of preferential admissions of minority students to colleges and universities. In other words, having denied minority children an opportunity to develop the kinds of intellectual skills that would make lower admission standards for them unnecessary. They then send minority students on to institutions where they are less likely to meet course standards designed for better prepared students, and where most majority students do not last long enough to graduate during their time on campus. Such students help present a photogenic picture of quote unquote diversity on many campuses, but their roles are much like those of movie extras who simply provide a background for others. Oh, wow. Despite many pious expressions of goodwill and hope for improvements in the education of minority students, few are prepared to do what it takes, including taking on entrenched vested interests in the schools of education, the teachers' unions, and state, local, and national educational bureaucracies. Even fewer are prepared to challenge Black students to work harder and abandon the counterproductive notion that seeking educational excellence is quote unquote acting white. Despite the heartening achievements of some Black schools, which have repeatedly demonstrated what is possible even with children from low-income backgrounds, the general picture of the education of Black students is bleak. Much of what is said and not said about the education of Black students reflects the political context rather than the educational facts. Whites walk on eggshells for fear of being called racist, while many Blacks are preoccupied with protecting the image of Black students rather than protecting their future by telling the blunt truth. It is understandable that some people are concerned about image, about what in private life might be expressed as, in quotes, what will the neighbors think, end quote. But when your children are dying, you don't worry about what the neighbors think. History versus visions. It requires courage to cast the accumulated myths of time, of lifetime, to be the wind. What? Okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking about this. Do I want to insert this or do I not? So I saw this video a year ago or so, roughly, I don't know. And it was of this kid getting his hair cut. And when I tell you his afro was huge, I mean, I can't even describe it. Like, it looked like, you know, like those like over-exaggerating stereotype type deals where it's like 2 or 3 feet wide or something, and it comes up probably like over 2 foot or something. Put it to you this way, it would fill the screen, okay, and then have some left over, right? He sits down to have his haircut, and he's a skinny guy, so this afro looks abnormally exaggerated on his body size. And he looked like a completely different person as soon as he had his haircut and stuff. And I commented, truthfully, and this is why he probably couldn't find a job, couldn't find actual meaningful, being proud of employment. Nobody acknowledged it. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? If you own a business, or if you are in charge of hiring folks, or if you just lead with logic, somebody coming in with like a 2 foot wide afro, okay, you can't put a hairnet on that. I mean, they would have to always have braids or something like that, right? But if he's literally walking around with that afro like that, he ain't get no job like that. I remember the time when people had, they said, oh, you know, I'm gonna wear my natural hair and all that kind of stuff. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful for you to embrace your natural hair, absolutely. You need to learn how to style it, how to take care of it and all that. So people are walking around with these ginormous afros. A lot of them that were doing that would not be keeping them properly. They would look totally dry, unkempt, or they would turn them into these horrifically hard, like dense and large dreads, and wonder why they couldn't get gainful employment. Oh, it's discrimination, it's racism. No, it's called, what you hear in this book, the way that you represent yourself, personal hygiene, all of those things, the clothes that you wear, how you speak and all that kind of stuff, that all of that together is a total package that people can actually market, and you are marketing yourself for gainful employment. Okay, now if you want to be like, I don't know, in the back someplace where nobody sees you and you're doing all of this stuff that's like totally undesirable, I mean, if you can't get the leg up, try and do an evaluation. You can't nowadays, you cannot have those long nails and all that kind of stuff, or crazy colors, or like whatever it is, all the jewels on there and stuff. along with the big eyelashes and all that. That's not work stuff. Get the smaller eyelashes and save those big nails for when you are like doing a special occasion, going on your week's vacation, whatever it is, right? And then have them clipped, have the polish changed, whatever, right? Neutral colors. Because what people are seeing and hearing and even smelling, you got to watch how you smell, like that, they take all of that into account. And then also your social media stuff has to be on point, like all that kind of stuff. Anyway, but that's why I was getting tripped over this. I was like, should I talk about it? Should I not? I don't know. I'm gonna freaking talk about it. I don't know why I keep second guessing myself. This is my channel, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, back to reading. So, History versus Visions. And this is from John Perazzo. I don't know if that's how you say it or whatever. It requires courage to cast the accumulated myths of a lifetime to the wind. Our natural desire for simplicity, certitude, and the approval of others occasionally causes us to defend even our most flawed worldviews as if our very lives depended on them. Dead belief systems are difficult to bury, for in doing so, we enter a world we do not recognize. We watch the carefully crafted towers of our understanding crash down in ruins, and we lose an integral piece of the only reality we have known, reinforced and imprinted on our minds by 1,000 voices, internal and external. John Perazzo, Johnpperazzo. Nowhere has history been more enthralled to belief systems, visions, than in the history of racial and ethnic groups. Too often the past has been twisted to fit the visions and the agendas of the present. Much of the history written about minority groups has in fact been a history of how others treated these groups, more so than a history of the groups themselves. This bias has distorted both the histories of racial and ethnic groups and the histories of the societies in which they have lived. Black Americans are just one of the groups whose history has been seen in this strange and twisted way as a commentary on American society and an opportunity to score ideological points or promote guilt or gain some contemporary political advantage. Mention Japanese Americans to quote-unquote internment camps, and quote-unquote internment camps come up. Mention Mexican Americans and the things suffered by them or by Mexico are sure to become the focus of discussion. Injustices should not be swept under the rug, but whole peoples are more than the sum of the injustices they have suffered. At least they should be seen as more. If history is truly to be history, and not just a projection into the past of contemporary visions and agendas, where world history is concerned, the same skewed approach has too often prevailed. Few things attract less attention than the achievements of the West, which have improved the lives of peoples around the world through medical science, technology, and economic organizations, more effective at producing the material output on which people depend for food, shelter, and the comforts and amenities of life. Those who warn against being Eurocentric are themselves often the most Eurocentric of all when it comes to assigning blame for slavery, imperialism, wars, and other human tragedies that have originated on every inhabited continent at one period of history or another. Quote-unquote multiculturalism has not meant warts and all portraits of different societies, has not meant warts and all portraits of different societies around the world. For many, it has meant virtually a warts-only portrait of the West and a no-warts portrait of non-Western peoples. More is involved. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, that's true. More is involved than a simple bias, however, the central doctrine of multiculturalism. The equality of cultures cannot be sustained when that means equality of concrete achievements, educationally, economically, or otherwise. It is not only the West whose achievements must be brushed aside or glided over in silence. Particularly dangerous to contemporary visions and agendas are achievements by groups that began in poverty and rose to prosperity, such as immigrants from Japan, Italy, China, or India who settled in various countries around the world. It is not just their achievements, but the very concept of achievement, which is antithetical antithetical, what? I can't be right. Antithetical to the multicultural vision, and which is therefore often evaded or denied. Much verbal ingenuity has been used circumventing the concept of achievements by calling them quote unquote advantages or quote unquote privileges, even when this does violence to the meanings of words and the facts of history, right? Often discussions of the supposedly impenetrable social barriers of poverty and skin color prejudice pass over in utter silence the history of various immigrants from Asia, whose economic levels have in fact often began in poverty and later surpassed that of the white majorities in countries of the Western Hemisphere. When visions and agendas suppress history, that not only distorts the achievements of groups, nations, or civilizations, it forfeits valuable knowledge as the things that have led to past progress and can lead to progress for others who are still lagging today. In short, it sacrifices the material interests of millions for the ideological or other parochial, parochial interests of a few. History and causation. History offers not simply a chronicle of events, but more importantly, opportunities to gain insights about the human condition from the experiences of other times and places. That is, it offers not merely facts, but explanations. When it comes to the history of different racial, ethnic, or other social groups, nothing calls more obviously for explanation than the great differences in rewards and performances among them. Here, casual explanations impinge on prevailing visions. Where the prevailing vision is one of external causation, verbal ingenuity often seeks to banish internal explanations. External versus internal explanations. One of the ways of sealing off a vision from the intrusion of discordant facts is with an ideological vocabulary that neutralizes such facts. One of the most important facts to be neutralized and excluded a priori from the prevailing vision of our times is the fact of differences in capabilities among individuals, groups, nations, and civilizations. When achievements are described as advantages or privileges, differences in outcomes ex post are treated as evidence or proof of differences in opportunities ex ante. What these verbal fashions accomplish in a wide range of circumstances is to preclude internal explanations of intergroup differences in favor of external explanations. Thus, the success of Lebanese businessmen in competing with their European counterparts in colonial Africa has been attributed to various Lebanese quote-unquote advantages. Firstly, the Lebanese had lower personal consumption levels than the Europeans. Besides, they had the advantage of having members of the family work in their shops and thus be an economic asset instead of a liability, as was the case with the Europeans. In a situation where Lebanese skill was at least as good as their rivals, they could win over a gradually increasing share of the business by price competition. In addition, the Lebanese skill was in some respects superior to that of the Europeans. The former had many more contacts with the African clients. Were willing to talk and bargain with them at length, and therefore had closer knowledge of them. As a result, they could grant credit to the Africans with less risk than the Europeans, could have earlier indication of shifts in consumer demand or crop prospects, and could manage the repayment relationship more skillfully. Another advantage of the Lebanese in the early days, at least, was that little of his profit had to be diverted to the amortization, amortization of fixed capital because there was little fixed capital. Thus, successful price competition by the Lebanese merchant was based on the advantages of both lower business and personal costs. Not one of these internal achievements of the Lebanese was due to any external benefits being made available to them that were not equally available to Europeans. On the contrary, the Lebanese typically began with less money than their European rivals, though even their quote-unquote little fixed capital is described as if it were an asset. But such a situation would not have been confined to quote-unquote the early days before the Lebanese achieved prosperity if in fact it were an asset. Don't go Hank, you in a good chance to media 11 minute.